Hello and welcome back to another episode of Her Side of the Ruck. I'm Tash.
I'm Bernice.
And we're not pundits.
We are just two women who know what a ruck is.
On today's episode, we are going to be talking British and Irish Lions versus the Wallabies in Test 2. And what a belter of a match that turned out to be. I feel like it definitely turned heads, that game. And I was on the edge of my seat throughout that game. So we are going to be breaking down some of the positives, some of the controversies that have come out of that match. But ultimately, it is a great win for rugby and it's a great win for the Lions. They win the tour with one game to go. They're heading to Sydney this week. But let's talk about Melbourne, because Melbourne looked like it was absolutely bouncing this weekend. Over 90,000 people in the MCG in Melbourne. It's a record attendance for the Lions match. And I feel like all the hype around in Melbourne leading up to that game, the sea of red, you saw loads of Wallabies fans. It was just absolutely fantastic, Bernice. Like, what are your thoughts watching that? Because you obviously, the Springboks do it well in South Africa. How does that compare?
Yeah, definitely. And I think watching it, like also compared to the first taste, it was just a complete change in the vibe and the atmosphere, and you could really feel it through the screen. Like you could just feel like this is Test rugby. And honestly, I just thought that game had everything. It had physicality, it had a great vibe, and also both of the fan bases were very loud this time around. So you heard the Aussies, and then you heard the British and Irish Lions fans. So it just had everything. And the game itself also was packed with physicality, that close margins. It was just a hard-fought battle, a tight scoring match, and also a little bit of niggle.
Oh, so much niggle. And there's been a lot of niggle coming out of it in post-match press. We're going to be talking a little bit about that more in this episode. But let's start off talking about the Aussies, because where they were timid at the start of last week and the atmosphere was a bit flat, I thought in Brisbane, it was polar opposites. It's like they were two different sides. And I know they got some key players back in their squad, but it was just like, whoa, what a difference.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, it was kind of polar opposites compared to the team that played in the first test. And obviously, it's great to see. And you could see the impact that Rob Valentini had and Will Skelton had, and not just with the Niggles, but just overall in the physicality and what they bring
Oh, yeah.
and what they bring to the team. You could tell that, like, the impact that they had was evident. But it was great to see. I think the Aussies came out guns blazing, and Michael Hooper said that the Aussies would probably treat this match like a final, and they did. And you could tell like this was serious to them as well. So it was great to see. They came out guns blazing and unfortunately couldn't get away with the win. But honestly, it was such a good match.
It had everything great about Test rugby. Like, as you
Mm.
said, Bernice, great physicality, some wicked tries, a lot of niggles in between stoppages of play as well. So I have to agree with you. Skelton was awesome. I mean, he's a big guy and he's torn it up in the top 14 when he's playing in the domestic leagues. But a lot of commentators were saying that he didn't really get much of a start for Australia in the past, and he hasn't been capped as much as maybe he should be. But when he came off the pitch, there was a massive slump in the Australia side in that second half because he was one of their key playmakers. For me as well, I thought Tom Liner improved massively in this test. Okay, he misses one kick at the post, but apart from that, he had a really solid game. I feel like he'd grown in confidence, and actually a testament to Joe Schmidt not taking
Yeah.
him out of the team after he has maybe a touch and go first start in the golden jersey. He really grew into that, and that is a sign of a good coach, even if you disagree with some of the things that Schmidt has come out in the media after that game, which we'll be breaking down a little bit later. Australia were dominant in the ruck. They were in the previous week in the first test. They were again in test 2. McWright had another great game. I thought Gordon, his try was great and his box kicking was really fantastic. Tizzoni coming off the bench, again, another key impact player.
Mm,
He performed as well as he did in the first test, I thought.
mm,
And when he came on in the test in Brisbane, he lifted the spirit and the morale of that Aussie team. And I think when Oz really started to dip off, I think after the 36th, 37th minute, and let the Lions come back in, and the Lions were just too much stronger in that second half. They were
mm,
way more determined. But when Tizzoni came on and was disrupting a few things around the park, it kind of gave Australia that feeling that they could stay in it, that they could just clinch it by 2 points. That obviously was not the case. It was a much better game. I feel like for neutrals watching it, it was a better game. For
mm,
as a Lions fan watching it, it was a much better game, and the quality of rugby was better. But
mm.
ultimately, in my opinion, I feel like Australia went pew 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 pew, and then it was just kind of like, oh, we haven't got any more firepower left,
Mm.
and then the Lions just went, now is the time. And where the Lions bench lacked last week, core, it was like in your face this week.
Yeah, and I think yeah, everything that you said is spot on, but it was just very crazy to see because last week I said I was really hoping to see Tate McDermott get a start, but then Gordon actually stepped up so well and he had a great match. So, and then when Tate McDermott came onto the pitch, he performed well, just as he did the week before. But yeah, I think the players they selected, like Rob Valentini and like Will Skelton, really made a big difference. And yeah, it's a pity that they couldn't walk away with the win because they were 23-5 up, I think, until like the 33rd minute. But I have to say, if I'm being honest, I think Australia lost the game in that like last 7 minutes of the first half. Even
Mm,
though the Lions scored the last minute try, the last 7 minutes I just think is where Australia lost the match because it actually gave the Lions confidence knowing that okay, we're still in the fight. And yeah, so to me that's kind of things went wrong for Australia. But I think Swali was outstanding. Like he's
mm.
so dangerous on attack, and it's like beautiful to watch.
Last week, a lot of the commentators weren't saying Suali's name, as this week
Mhm.
he was everywhere, and
Yeah.
he finishes and passes the ball. He's beautiful to watch in terms of his
Mm,
movement and
mm,
where his positioning is. And I do think Australia's attacking phases and even their defense was far better this week than it was
yeah.
in the first test. But their attack in that opening 30 was magnificent. And
Mm,
I agree with you. That final 7 minutes gave the Lions some oomph. Like there's been a lot of press that's come out of
mm,
where the players and the coaches have said stuff about the halftime talk, and it
mm,
gave them firepower because if they were 15 to 16, 17, 18 points down, that is a much bigger deficit to claw back in 40
yeah.
minutes than 5 points, 6 points.
Mhm,
And that's where the Lions ultimately were. So they were like, well, we can do this. It's not a couple of penalties and you're back even. One try and you're close to being in touch. So yeah, I think the Aussies were amazing in the first 30, realized that they'd switched off and were like, oh, pants. We need to actually do something. And rugby's an 80-minute game or even longer, depending on the final phase of play. And I'll talk a bit more about the Hugo Keenan try. It was a great individual finish, but ultimately it came off a team backing themselves. And I felt like they got
mm,
to a point where Australia backed themselves because it was do or die. And then they didn't,
mm,
as the
mm.
Lions got better and better and better throughout that game. So ultimately, Lions were the better side in the final few minutes, but I think Australia were probably better initially. And that's probably why Wallabies fans feel a bit hard done by with that game.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, if you look at it like holistically, in the second half, the Lions only allowed the Wallabies to score 3 points, and then the Lions went on to score the last minute try, which ultimately led them to a series win. But yeah, I think it's very disappointing for the Wallabies because like it was so close, but still so far, for them. So I think they will really be kicking themselves and looking back at it like they'd probably want to do a few things a bit differently. And I feel like that match also just shows how fine the margins can really be because if
Mm.
Swali got the ball out and did pass, then they could have scored a try, or if Iquital did not miss the tackle on James Lowe. Like there's a lot of if buts and yeah. So I think they'd really
Mhm.
look back at this game and be like so frustrated. But overall, you have to give credit to the Lions because they stayed in the fight. They knew what they wanted to do and they knew what they were there for. So and ultimately they took the win. So they did what they needed to do.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about this Lion squad, starting with let us applaud and take a bow to Tom Curry. He scores again on in his second test, and
Crazy.
he's everywhere in defense. I think Jack Morgan does a good job when he comes on defense. I'm sure some people will have his name firmly in mind with that final decision, which we'll talk about. But Tom Curry has really stepped up in these final two tests. And I mean, we said it last week, people were surprised that he was included as the starting seven over
Mm.
Jack Morgan, particularly in that first test. But my goodness, he has just got better and better and better. And selfishly, we're bringing that talent back to England. And if he obviously starts for me in an England shirt, and I'm excited to see who Borthwick picks for the Autumn Nations in the back row because there's such a big pool of great back rowers. But
Yeah.
Tom Curry has been amazing. I potentially I don't see him starting in this third test purely because why don't you just start Pollock for the fun of it? He's the guy who brings the
Mm.
pizzazz. Tom Curry is the guy that graphs and graphs and graphs. But he could be up there for test player of the series because he has grown in confidence and really proven himself. Hugh Jones has also shone. I think he's
Mm.
grown in skill whilst being a Lion. I mean, he's been really good for a really long time and one of the top try scorers for Scotland. But normally when you see him score tries, he kind of does a great line break. And with that combination,
Mm.
either with Shoni Tuipulotu or in a Scotland or Glasgow jersey with Stafford McDowell, those combos tend to work very well. And he normally just clean breaks away or sets someone else to break up away. But we saw him doing a really kind of
Mm.
tough, muscled finish. Great physical try scored by Hugh Jones there. Again, talk about the Lions bench. Genji, Jack Morgan, James Ryan, all amazing. Exactly what you needed at that point in time. Andy Farrell is an absolute mastermind. And Hugo Keenan has written himself into Lions and rugby history with that finish. And he just looks so, of course, he was so happy because that try won the Lions the test series, but he was just absolutely elated, almost like a schoolboy who could get two
Yeah.
rounds of chocolate pudding almost. But it
Beaming.
was so good. But it was a great individual finish after
Mm.
13 phases of passing the ball through the hands in those final 2 minutes. And we've seen club sides kick the ball away or not back themselves to score that final try when in those last ditch minutes. And okay, sure, if they hadn't scored that try, we'd be talking about a very different scenario right now. Everything would
Mm.
be on Saturday
Yeah.
in Sydney, but it's not because the Lions back themselves and they have that self-belief. I think that's a testament to the men in the squad, but I think that's a testament to the attitude of Andy Farrell as a coach.
For sure. And I think it was great to see because we have said on a previous episode, we hate it when you just see the winger or any backline player standing there and waving like, please pass the ball.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about the exact same thing. And I was just like, sometimes you see teams, they in the exact same position, but they decide to pick and drive, and they don't get anywhere. Whereas the Lions actually made it look so easy because they just passed the ball and like they actually made it look so easy and showed other teams how it should be done when you are in that position.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. That one. A word on Finn Russell as well. His
Hmm.
kicking for posts wasn't amazing this week. It was far better in the first test, but his kicks
Yeah.
to the corner,
Oh my
holy
goodness.
smokes, so good. Like you literally were like, they're like, oh, is it gone too far? But no, it's bang on. Like, I mean, I know a lot of Scottish rugby fans have been raving about how class Finn has been for a long time, and he has been a class player for a very long time. But I feel in the past 2 years, up here, he's really switched on. I don't know if that's to do with like his personal circumstances. He's a father of two, and there's more responsibility on that to be more serious, whether that's the environment that he's in at Bath Rugby, whether that's the environment that he's in at Scotland. I don't know what it is. I think it could be a combination of all of them. But he seems to be having fun with it, but also taking it a bit more serious than he was maybe taking international rugby 5-6 years ago. He is a maverick. I know people will be like, oh, I hate that Netflix kind of like called him that and like he said that about himself, but I think he is, because he's fantastic to watch, great through ball through hand. But for me, the kicks to the corner this week were just stunning.
Yeah, no, insane. And I think Finn Russell throughout this season for the Lions have been so good. And yes, he had an off day with the kicking tee, but just like in the overall game, and lucky for him, it turned out to not count that much in this game. So yeah, and maybe if he did kick to like if the kicks to post that go better, then the Lions probably would have won more comfortably. But yeah, in saying that, he was just superb, and I love watching Finn Russell play lately.
Oh, so good. He's playing with joy, with confidence, and masterful skill. Before we talk about Test 3, with pride on the table and historical legacy on the table for the Lions, let's talk about the post-match controversy, shall we? Because I think it's really interesting. I want to get your opinion, Bernice, as probably the unbiased voice on this pod. I personally think Andrea Priardi made the correct decision with that call. It reminds me very much of when Freddie Stewart tackled a Sale Sharks player in the semi-final of the Gallagher Prem this season. He couldn't physically get any lower. And I feel that the way that the refereeing team walked through the decision made it clear and made the right decision. But I think the North and the South have very opposite decisions on this one. Joe Schmidt obviously voiced his, I guess, how upset he was. I've seen several Australian commentators or reporters also voice their opinions on this, as well as Northern Hemisphere voice, including James Haskell, who's just gone, what on earth? Why are people making a fuss out of this in the way that someone like Hask does? For me, I'm obviously in the Northern Hemisphere backing the British and Irish Lions on this one, but you could easily say, like, given I'm English. So it'd be interesting to get your perspective from SA on that controversy.
Yeah, and I think it's so difficult because there are loads of different opinions online. Some people saying no, rugby has gone soft, and other people saying no, it should have been a red card or whatever the case. So people have voiced their opinions in a lot of different ways. But I think it all comes down to consistency again, because you see an incident like that, but you see something similar in a previous match or in previous weeks, and it gets carded or it gets referred to the bunker, and sometimes it gets upgraded to a red, other times it stays a yellow depending on the circumstances. And I think that's the most frustrating thing to fans watching, is the lack of consistency, because in one match it's that, and then in another match it's just a rugby incident. And I think for most of the time when fans watch and they see an incident like that, we're like, okay, no, it's just a rugby incident. But then when you look at the laws, it's a lot more than that. And they go through loads of different criteria, and they're like, yes, there's head contact and et cetera, et cetera. And it turns out to be a lot more than fans would think. So I think it just comes down to consistency. And it's interesting because obviously when you support the Wallabies, or when you look from a Wallabies point of view, you have one opinion, and when you're from the Northern Hemisphere, you're obviously going to say, no, it's nothing, like move on, rugby incident. And which, like, I completely get. So for me it's tough. I think if you look at previous decisions that have been made on incidents like that, then it should have at least been a penalty, but purely based off what has happened in the past and decisions that have been made in the past. But if you look at just the incident itself, then I don't really see anything wrong. And a lot of people will say that rugby has gone soft. But we have to also look at player safety. But I think purely based on consistency, it should have been a penalty. But if you take all of that away and you remove the law in a perfect world, then it's nothing. So yeah, I think it's very tough.
I think as well, Andrea Piardi is a very experienced referee. He's done a lot of the ref a lot of the big games, including URC finals, semi-finals, other international matches. He wouldn't make a rash decision. We saw it with Ben
Mm.
O'Keefe the week before, how good a referee there was. World Rugby are not going to pick a new referee to ref a Lions match that comes once every 4 years, or three matches that come once every 4 years. So I've obviously voiced my opinion. I think it's the correct decision. Aussie fans, if you're watching this, let us know. We want to hear your feelings. It's all very interesting for us to discuss and learn about on this pod. But at the same time, where I take issue is not with the call and not with Oz fans saying that they think something different. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion and discussing the match afterwards. What I take issue with is when people have said we should have won that match. Well, why didn't you? You switched off way before that controversial event happened. So, however, the players will be feeling afterwards, you could have not let the Lions in with that 7 minutes to go in that first half. You could have done something different with your attack in the second half. You could have done something different with your defense in the second half. So, what I take issue with is when people, I know I say make excuses, but it's almost like too little too late. And I found that this was the same when the Wallabies beat England coming out of the Autumn Nation series in at the end of 2024. Because I didn't get to watch that match, but I listened to a lot of commentary afterwards, and people were saying it seems like at that point in time where England were in terms of their transition, they obviously have improved massively in the past few months. But people were saying it seems too little, too late for England. It's that last ditch effort, and I feel like that kind of flip for Australia. They were ahead and then let it slip, and although you had a lot of Leinster boys in the Lions, I felt like Australia did what Leinster often do, which is go ahead really, really early and then fall off in the clutch moments, which obviously isn't the case because Leinster have won the URC, and I feel that's a turning point for them as a club. However, there have been so many instances where teams get so far ahead that they become lax, and the Lions exploited that. Ultimately, they were the better team. They have, I think when you look at the talent in the British and Irish Isles at the minute, is some of the best we've seen in a very, very, very long time. I think in the past, Lions tours have been made up of some very outstanding individual players and then made up of other very good players. Whereas in the past, the Southern Hemisphere teams have been way more cohesive as units, like lots of individual skill, but more cohesive as units, which hasn't been the case with the Lions in the past. But on this tour, that cohesiveness has come together, and that is down to Andy Farrell. So for me, the decision, the media chats that have come out of it is all a bit too little too late. But look, I'm the one who's smiling here. I'm not wearing red, but I'm feeling red, very, very red. And I'm incredibly proud of the British and Irish Lions and what they've achieved. I'm personally also really proud of Ollie Chesham, who Leicester Tigers player, that is my club, home club. So that he got a start and was able to represent and get the win for the Lions. Obviously, not just his individual effort, but all of the boys. Great game, one that will live long in Lions history and the long lives of rugby memory.
Yeah, and I guess what is a Lions tour without controversy? Because we've seen it in 2021 with the Springboks as well, where Warren Gatland and the whole Nick Berry thing. So there was a lot of controversy, and this time around as well. So what is a Lions series without controversy? It just adds to it.
We all love a bit of drama. Who doesn't like a bit of drama, particularly on a Lions tour? It only comes every 4 years. If it wasn't interesting, over 90,000 people wouldn't have been at the MCG. That's all
Right?
I'm saying. So test 2 was a showstopper. Test 3, the final test. It all comes down to pride in Sydney. Are the Aussies going to be bageled 3-0 or are they going to front up and take that one game that could change a lot for Australia? They're obviously going into the Rugby Championship very, very soon. The World Cup draw is in December. There's places and rankings to fight for. Being bageled on home soil, that would be tough to take. The last time the Lions won a tour 3-0 was in 1927 against Argentina.
Wow.
So on a Lions end, everyone wants to be in that starting 15, or if they can't be in the starting 15, in that 23, because to be in that squad that plays and you bagel Australia and you make history, not from 98 years on, that would be incredible. And if they win in Sydney, they've also completed the tour 9-0, which is a fantastic achievement, because one of the I suppose the ups and downs of a Lions tour is the injuries, how tired the players are, particularly coming off the back of quite a long season of club rugby and international rugby for their individual countries. But Oz have to fight for pride. The last thing they want is to lose again.
Yeah, and I think that's what is so hard about the Lions winning the second test, because ultimately, if Australia won the second test, then it would all come down to this Saturday. But now it's kind of like the series have already been won. So it'd be interesting to also see the kind of mindset that the Wallabies would go into in this test, and the same with the Lions, because you don't want to become complacent now. And I'm sure that was Andy Farrell's goal from the beginning, is obviously you want to win the series, but ultimately 3-0 is a massive achievement, especially on home soil, on the Aussies' home soil. So it's going to be interesting to see with what type of mindset Australia goes in, and are they going to say, okay, listen, boys, we have nothing to lose. Let's just go out there, guns blazing, and just win this match. So then it's 2-1. And like you said, it's going to be massive for Australia going into the championship. It's going to be a massive confidence booster, because they'll be touring to South Africa for the first two matches. So if they can just walk out here with a win, I think it's going to be massive to them. But if the Lions walk away 3-0, it's also going to be massive to the Lions going into the Autumn Nation series, even though it's only a bit later in the year. It'll give them a massive confidence boost.
It doesn't even matter that the series has already been won. It's about that pride, that momentum for both teams. And look, Lions fans who have put a lot of time and a lot of money into following around the squad all over the country will want to see a bagel. Like, imagine being a fan on that tour. That is a story of a lifetime to tell anybody you meet and you will meet in the future, that you're on the Lions tour when they bageled Australia. And equally, you almost don't want Australia to lose. You want them to win. So you've got that momentum going forward. And I suppose where the issues and some where the complaints have been about Australia in the past, you don't want that to be hanging over their shoulders ahead of the Rugby Championship. You want the Rugby Championship to be as competitive as possible. But obviously on this show, we want South Africa to win because of Bernice and her affiliations. Springboks. So don't ever quote, don't take that out of context when Springboks play England. I'm sure someone will. Anyway.
We're just going to clip that up.
No, I will come back to haunt me. Dear. But yeah, there's a lot on the line, even though the series has already been won. It is about pride, and we know how big the pride is of the gentlemen that adorn the rugby jerseys, don't we? So that is going to be a cracker. We'll be watching, we'll be covering plenty of content and some reactions on our channels. I will be sticking with my 3-0 predictions. I think it will be close, but I still think the Lions will take it. Bernice, what about you?
Yeah, and I'm so frustrated because literally the first test, both of us got it right by like the closest of margins. And then the second test, I was like, no, Australia by 5. So they leave us on the edge of our seats this coming week. And then it was almost the case. And then obviously the Lions scored the last minute try. So I actually don't know what I want to say this week. I feel like I need to back Australia again. I don't know by how many. I'm just going to say they're going to play for pride and hopefully take the win. But that is purely hate because this time around my heart is actually saying no, the Lions are going to win. So, but I'm backing Australia. Like, let's just see them do it.
Yeah, well, you heard it here, folks. We will be posting another prediction videos on our socials. So they are in the links in the description below. But for now, thanks so much for joining us on another episode of Her Side of the Ruck. We'll be back again next week talking about the final tests of the British and Irish Lions tour in Australia. But for now, thanks for watching. If you want to follow us, please like, subscribe. We really appreciate all your support. We'd love to get to 100 subscribers by the end of August. I feel like we can definitely do it. So please, all of your support, it makes a huge difference. And we've also got some really exciting announcements coming out in the next few weeks, and we're really excited to share that with you. Thanks so much for watching. Signing off here in the UK is me, Tash.
Signing off from SA is Bernice.
Thanks for watching. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.